Incorporated. We're turning on the machines. I said this yesterday. Apparently we're live now. Okay, now we're actually live. I'm gonna check. I like check with my wife Natalie. I'm like, can you actually see us? Because yesterday me and Shannon were live for like 15 minutes, but we weren't live. So we're double checking. Let's
I
see.
I I so need to pick your brain about all this infrastructure.
I
I
don't
don't know
know
what
what
it
the
looks
hell I'm
like on the
doing.
other side of the camera for you, but I'm in a random co-working space and I have various lights angled to make it look like I'm not in a bunker. And yet I'm still kind of in a bunker.
Here we are in the bunker. Well, this one, let's see. So it's not live for whatever reason. It's not live on the TikTok right now. I have to put in a stream key will be shown when you start your live. Start the live, but then it won't let me start the damn live. Eric, guys,
I
so
I got time. It
this is
best
what
to
we're doing. I decided
workshop
to do
this.
this no budget, no producer, although we will have a producer by Monday because a lot of my friends wrote, they were like, girl, you cannot be out here raw like this. Let me help you. So this week you are watching V try to just fail out loud and try really hard. And then next week, hopefully we'll see, we should have something better. It looks like we are online on Instagram, at least. Go Bills. I'm seeing your chat there. And let's see if we are live on, I don't think we're live on TikTok yet, but I'm going to get you talking while I'm trying to get it going. This is my friend Eric. We are not related, though we could be. Normally, Eric wears glasses and a little hat like this. So I wear glasses and a little hat like this, not just because I wanted to emulate you and try to trick people into thinking we're twins and then nobody could tell the difference, but also because it's St. Patrick's Day, the one day of the year that I invoke my Irishness.
I did not, I knew I felt spiritually compelled, other than to just look like twins with you, to wear that hat today.
Yeah.
And then I was like, no, better not. Like, I didn't want to seem unprofessional.
No, this is very unprofessional. This is
Abraham
rogue.
Lincoln is watching.
He my favorite gay president. But I identify as Albanian because that's like how I was raised, like mostly with like my mom's side of stuff, though my dad's entire family is straight up like fully Irish and American, like straight through. There's nothing else. So on St. Patrick's Day, and when I went to Dublin, I was like, yes, my people.
Yeah.
This is who I am.
You were just mincing and gambling around the streets and
this is who I am.
Looking for a Guinness and a shillelagh.
I was, and I, and the fish and chips of it all, the potato blade of it all. I did it all, and I do have a shamrock tattoo, one of my first tattoos.
As one would, coming from the East Coast of America and being Irish.
You must indeed.
It's a law, isn't it?
Well, because you could kind of convince your family that like, oh, it's for the people, right? It's not like a tattoo. It's like for our family. So I have, but then I was like 18 when I got it, and my mom took me, of course. And, I wanted like the little shamrock. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll get the word lucky with it too. And it'll be like a lucky shamrock. It was 1999.
Yeah.
And so my choices as a woman at that
Sugar
time.
Ray was on the radio.
Yes. Were like tramp stamp or, barbed wire on the arm. And I was like, well, I'm going to get it on my hip, so that way you won't see it all the time. And obviously my body will never change from what it looks like when I'm 18.
I've heard they don't do that.
No, they don't. So I got lucky very low on my hip, like a little too low, perhaps, to the point that when I showed my mom the tattoo, she's like, why? You'd have to be lucky to see it. And I was like, it's over. It's ruined.
Oh, wow. That's a solid line, though. This is where you get it.
So it started off and it was like, lucky. And now I'm 43 and it's like, lucky.
You didn't show it to a lot of people. Did you show it to a lot of folks in Ireland?
No, I sure didn't. But yeah, so that's the story, my Irish story, to kick us off with our hot political gossip of the day. What's your Irish story?
I don't think I have an Irish story. I was doing like a sort of reporting tour of various areas with like sectarian conflict or a history of sectarian conflict. Mm-hmm. And I was going from Lebanon to Kosovo to Northern Ireland, and just sort of investigating kind of like what the conversation is in places like this. And I remember going to a mall in Belfast. Like the guys were obviously, this is not the Republic of Ireland, but this Northern Irish guy was sort of showing me around, and he was like, you have to understand, like, we have a mall, and this is the most amazing thing in the world, because like, years ago we couldn't have a mall. And then, I took a bus right across the border into Dublin, and it was one of the first times that they had had a hard border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. And I was like, on this journey, I was like, oh my gosh, the world is changing in these like really, really subtle ways, where you have places that were in conflict previously that now have, a Costa coffee in them. And then you have other places where suddenly we're having these insinuations of harder and harder borders throughout the world. And it's really hard to know, just like your tattoo.
You never know.
When you experience something when you're 18, it changes so slowly that you don't realize that it's going to look entirely different. And that might be a place that you visited, or it might be a country. And there's very few places that send people that stay exactly the same throughout the world.
You know what I was inspired by lately is looking, you grow up and you're looking at maps. So for folks who are just joining the live, this is my friend Eric. How do you say your last name? Kluger?
Zuliger.
Zuliger. This is Eric Zuliger. And he is the Under Report. He does hot geopolitical gossip and does the whiteboard explainers for all the things that are going on around the world right now that I feel like all growing up, I was intentionally kept away from learning anything about international conflict. They were like, no, you're in America. That's all you need to learn. We don't learn about other countries. They learn about us. But when you're out there looking at the maps that they put in American schools are very not accurate or true to size. So I went out and I got a map that shows the actual country sizes the way that they are. And I continue to reference it now to see just how big Iran is, and just how small the United States is compared to like Africa, and how even smaller Europe is compared to like other places. People should know that the maps that you picture in your head as an American are not accurate, and we are not actually the biggest country by a lot.
Right. Well, and this is I think, you're talking about like the Mercator versus the Phillips projection, or Peters projection. And what I've noticed is like every single country in the world that I've been in, and when I've been traveling around, oftentimes I found myself working as a teacher. So I've worked as a 3rd and 4th grade teacher in Iraqi Kurdistan. I was a high school teacher in Albania. And I've done little teaching gigs here and there all over the place. And of course, like, ubiquitous, every 3rd and 4th grade classroom has a globe, and they have a big map and stuff like that. And you notice that like the country that you're in is absolutely centered right at the dead center of the map, and it looks like the biggest country around. And looking at, I don't know, Iraqi Kurdistan, and it's as big as the United States map in the 3rd and 4th grade classrooms that I went to. You're like, oh, this is this sort of like subtle form of like geographic supremacy that like we all kind of have to have like when we're growing up. But then you realize the world is a lot larger than it actually is.
And the United States is actually not the center of the universe, though they are behaving as if it is right now.
I was like, one of the things that I hope for as an American is a boring president. And I hope for like not being in the news. Like since I spend so much time abroad, like anytime I hear about something crazy happening in the world, I'm like, oh, not us, not us, not us. Like, oh, don't let it be an American thing that's happening. And then sometimes it is. And I'm like, in whatever country I'm in, I'm going to have a lot of questions from the locals. And I've elected myself to be that position of like, oh, I don't know, but I'll go find out. Everything. I was checking in with the BBC today, and I was just like, every single story. And it's like, what, Iran is the top one. Then there's also Cuba. And then there's also Lebanon and some things going on in Taiwan too. So yeah, it's
let's start at the top, Eric. We're going to do this every week. We're going to start at the top with an intelligence report on Cuba. What's going on, homie? So the power grid failed. They haven't gotten oil in 3 months.
That's right.
And the people, they can't cook food, their trash and sanitation is disrupted. Imagine what life would be like if all you had was daylight or starlight. That's what people in Cuba are dealing with right now.
Yeah, so and this is something that's really important for us to think about right now specifically is, we're looking at what an important resource is, what an important resource oil really is for the day-to-day lives of people who don't have as big of a geopolitical buffer as we have in the United States. We have strategic reserves that will last us, depending on who you ask, between 30 and 90 days.
Mm.
Other countries, especially island nations, they just don't have the type of strategic reserves that the United States does. So when something fluctuates geopolitically, they feel it in a week's time the way that we would feel it in a couple of months' time. So
Mm.
the situation on the ground, and I actually have some folks on the ground there, is the fact that slowly, the generators started winding down. It was a power schedule for, maybe you'd have 4 or 5 hours of electricity a day, but then it slowly wound down to 1 or 2 hours. And then suddenly it's just the most essential things. So things like water pumps, obviously you need to get water
Mhm.
into homes, and you need plumbing and sanitation. But even that stuff is starting to go down. And the reason for that is the fact that every country in the world needs oil for their
Mhm.
essential services. And so really what has occurred is the United States essentially choked off the main sources of Cuban oil, first with Venezuela, and then through diplomatic pressure with Mexico. Mexico was like, no, we're going to do sort of humanitarian oil delivery of aid into Cuba. And Mexico, or the United States, basically said, no, you're not. And Mexico is like, I guess we're not.
Mm.
So this is entirely U.S. driven. An enormous amount of leverage has been gained by the Trump administration, and the question is ultimately like, well, how much how much is the Trump administration going to use this leverage, and what do they want? We've already seen some movement down the de-escalation ladder, and that movement looks, on face value pretty minimal, but it is, anytime you have a sort of like beginning agreement, then that creates basically deal momentum.
Mm.
So it can start out with, hey, we're reopening our embassy, and down the line, once that deal momentum takes a hold, it can turn into a better diplomatic situation. So we have seen the release of 51 political prisoners. This was a deal that was brokered by the Vatican and the United States.
Oh,
Uh,
the church
yeah,
is
I
involved.
know. Vatican, come. It was
Okay.
Pope Leo, Chicago boy,
Chicago showing up.
right? Yeah. So 51 political prisoners. Apparently, there are over 1,400 political prisoners in Cuba. So this would be, the sort of beginning of some kind of dialogue and progress. Also, the Cuban president has said, hey, we are in open dialogue with the United States, which is not something the Cuban president usually talks about.
Okay.
There's an antagonistic relationship between the US and Cuba,
Right.
obviously. But what he needs to do is he needs to say to his constituents, even though this is a sort of like more autocratic environment, he needs to say, look, I am making progress on this. We're going
Mm.
to try and get the lights back on. The second bit of news that's come across recently, which I think is more interesting that people are giving it credit for right now, is there's this sort of policy coming, and it looks like the policy would allow Cubans who have Cuban citizenship, or people who are exiled from Cuba, to purchase property or invest in property in Cuba. So
Eric, I feel
why?
icky about that. I feel a little scared about that. When
Yeah,
Trump starts doing like a real estate thing, it's like red flag to me. I'm like, wait, what? What are we doing now?
yeah.
Okay.
And like it's unfortunate, like I think we as journalists like have to maintain this like constant theory of mind about Donald Trump's administration. We're like, but what does this mean in the mind of the Trump administration? And
Yeah,
I
of a
feel the exact
grifter.
same way.
The second I hear we're going to allow some people to do something, I am suspicious. I'm like,
I
ooh,
think
which
that's
people?
that was exactly what tipped my radar about it. So I was like, okay, well, you know, face value, I guess that seems fine. You like if you were born in Cuba and then, maybe you want to invest. But I think what this is more of an indication of is one, this sort of, this almost like a donor state oligarchy type of situation where it's
Mhm.
like, oh, I know a bunch of Cubans that would love to invest, and shockingly, I'm assuming there might be some business contacts there, and a
Mm,
golf course might show up soon.
mm.
This is all speculation.
Well, he
Um,
so much has said that. He said Cuba has such beautiful beaches. Cuba's so beautiful. It's just a shame that for the last 50 years, they've been unable to, like, really harness the power of tourism. And it's like,
it's
ooh,
got
ooh,
to
ooh,
be
ooh.
so strange to like go to a country and be like, I could put a golf course on this.
Yeah.
Like, I've never at any point in my life have I ever been like, you know what this needs? This needs a golf course.
Or a big gold tower. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just it's
I
everywhere. I mean, Gaza,
100%.
same thing, right? He's constantly looking for like where he's going to create some sort of like Trump Riviera
Right.
on the over the bodies, quite literally, of people who have struggled and suffered in that particular territory.
Which I think, like, I think that one of the sort of tactics that we're seeing here, which is really disturbing, and I think that it needs to be called out more than frankly is possible, is the fact that the speed at which things are developing is a bit of the technique, right?
Hmm.
The technique is to be faster than international law and to be sort of unassailable by the news because the thing that just happened, well, that's in the rear view mirror because the new thing is happening. And
Hmm.
so if we don't take a pause to look at each one of these things in isolation and dive into each one of those things, then it sort of grants this de facto permission, which allows more atrocities to happen.
Hmm.
Currently there is a 5,000 person base going into Gaza that is being built out as a part of the operational control of Gaza. We have the quote unquote board of peace, which
Oh
has
Christ.
done
Yeah.
right, and this is essentially a new transnational organization which has a mandate from the UN, so essentially UN funding, which allows it to operate. And then, of course, it has this strange structure whereby countries can pay to become a part of it, but those funds are all sort of like held in escrow and controlled by Donald Trump, who's the chairman, and then a sort of technocratic layer of bankers and political elites that shockingly are Western and don't contain a good deal of Palestinians, if any.
Mm-hmm.
So
He's doing too much, as the kids say.
yeah,
You're doing too much, bro. You're doing too much. We've got bombs in Iran going down. We've got
yep,
the Board of Peace. We've got this idea of him and Jared Kushner creating Gaza into some sort of like new Riviera for Western tourists and Israel to control. We've got Israel joking with Tucker Carlson about how from the river to the sea now means from Egypt to the Euphrates, which is,
right,
you know what I mean? Like, that's not a joke though. That's like they're saying it out loud, right? And
right,
and then having like a layer of deniability, like, oh, that'd be crazy, but I'm not seeing you. I'm seeing you work towards that idea. Then we've
right.
got the bombs in Venezuela. We took out Maduro, but his number two is in, and now Trump is saying he's got a great relationship with the number two. So sorry to that lady who gave her Nobel Peace Prize to Donald Trump. You're not
Oh
getting
yeah,
power. And now,
I
and
hope.
the shield.
Yes. Oh, I wanted to talk about the shield. Okay. So the shield of Americas. I wish that we didn't need to know the names of so many things, because it all feels like, it all feels like another Fast and the Furious movie. It's like five fast, five shields of America. It just like it feels like a marketing and branding exercise,
Hmm.
which it is. But like as a journalist, like you have to take it seriously. And so what the shields of the Americas is yet again, it is a sort of private transnational organization which has been set up by the administration that specifically invites South American and Central American nations to become a part of this, by which I mean donate to the coffers of it. The purpose of it is ostensibly to protect the South American and North American continents from drug trafficking and drug cartels. So as an analyst, like one of the first things that you think about anytime you hear something is like, well, one, I hear what you said that you want to do. Can you do that? The answer is likely no, that they cannot actually stop drug cartels without dealing with the main cause of drug cartels, which is the fact that America, specifically the United States of America, really likes drugs.
Loves them.
We like this is not a supply side thing.
No, and also a lot of people who are tasked with preventing drugs from hitting the streets or coming to the country are financially incentivized to help traffic them. But they're like white collar traffickers. Like they keep talking about these drug cartels in South America like it's a Narcos movie, right? Like everybody's like, so MS-13, like prison scary guy. We are the scary guy. We are the scary guy, but we are the scary guy with a badge and a tie. And so then they're like, no, it's different. It's different. It's like, it's not different. It's not different.
Well, the way that
supply and demand.
Right. And you know, the way that the US has sort of typically done corruption is by just making it legal with fancy lawyers. Right. But there's a couple of interesting chinks in the armor with the Shields of the Americas and also the Board of Peace. And I think it's important to kind of keep an eye on where these things go because you know, if you just sort of look at it on face value, it just looks like and feels like oftentimes what it is, which is just like we are sort of being bulldozed by this transnational like billionaire class, and that is not necessarily always the case. There are constraints here. So with the Board of Peace, the funding for the Board of Peace, so this is going back to Gaza, but I think it's good to sort of put them together because they have a similar structure. So with the Board of Peace, there are all of these billions of dollars that are sort of committed to like fund the thing. The largest amount of money going into the Board of Peace is committed from the United States, and I think it's like $11 billion. However, Congress does need to sign off on that. And if one day Congress finds its courage, then potentially those funds cannot actually end up going to that. Every country who is committed is just pledging that money. But of course, many of the countries that are committed are also democratic as well. So it's unlikely that some of them will actually end up paying that money. I know for a fact that you know, that Kosovo is committed to becoming a part of the Board of Peace, but Kosovo has a GDP of like probably $4 to $5 billion. So giving $1 billion to this thing,
quite a bit.
It doesn't seem like something that would rationally happen. In terms of the Shields of the Americas, obviously they are being funded by these independent countries. To what infrastructure that's going to, I do not know. Maybe some sort of joint military enterprise that hasn't really come up yet. But the problem with the Shields of the Americas system is the fact that they're actually leaving out the biggest economies in South America. Mexico didn't want to have anything to do with it, and Brazil didn't want to have anything to do with it. And so, you know, that is going to limit the sort of strategic depth that the Shield of the Americas actually has. Because, of course, sure, you can be buddy-buddy with the United States as much as you want, and that does help in South America. However,
sure helped Argentina. $40 billion helped Argentina.
Oof, boy, did it. Boy, did it. And I, you know, the thing that I'm not read in about other than the fact that strikes are going on, but it's the incursion into Ecuador. I did not actually expect Ecuador to be the subject of you know, the next narco terrorist thing. But I think we need to look at narco terrorism as the same way that we looked at the global war on terror, which was it was a thing we said to do a thing, right?
And that's exactly how I feel now. We've got a good question from the audience. F the Lemons and Bale says, what with these independent government adjacent organizations Trump is creating without legislation and funding via unusual means, will he be able to spend that money without legislative scrutiny? Like, can he actually? He's how is he doing this? Like, and does this stick around?
That's a really good question. From what I've been able to see about the funding that goes into these sort of public-private transnational organizations that are being set up, which with funds that are sort of directly controlled by the boards that Donald Trump is controlling. From what I understand, they are basically privately held funds within the board. So you can think about it almost like a corporate infrastructure. Can Tim Cook just go in and spend down all of Apple's budget? Probably not, because it's held sort of within the corporate structure of it. But by having this sort of like large financial war chest, it does sort of beg the question, what will those funds be used for? Now, in the case of Board of Peace, we know that it is largely being used for the International Stabilization Force, which is it's an international military force that is being run by an American general, and it has commitments of soldiers from various nations. So it's not American troops only, but it is a sort of international coalition of stabilization units. But then a lot of that money is presumably, and granted, this is the best case scenario, going to this sort of central technocratic layer of the reconstruction of Gaza. So those are individuals who were sort of voted into place by both the IDF and actually representatives of Hamas. And they're Palestinian. They're sort of Palestinian technocrats. And these are like, by technocrats, I mean like subject matter experts that are like, okay, well, I'm great at, I don't know, education or sanitation or the things that a country needs, basically. As far as Shield the Americas, I have no idea.
Feels like scamming to me. I have this conspiracy. We are going to talk about Joe Kent next, because breaking news while we've been on this live, Joe Kent just resigned from Joe Kent, who was the director of national counterterrorism, resigned, saying that Iran posed no imminent threat and he can't consciously support the ongoing war. So that's pretty big shit. Here's my little conspiracy theory about what's going on with the Board of Peace. I almost did this show with this guy who was a rebel gold hunter. He is like one of the foremost experts on the idea that there is Confederate gold out there, and that it's been guarded by families of sentinels for generations, and that actually the South didn't surrender.
You say families of sentinels?
Yes, that's what they call themselves, sentinels. They're sentinels. Yep. So they are. So the South didn't actually surrender because they were giving up on the war. They were just giving up on the war at that time because they recognized that the resources they had could not beat the North financial wise, and they needed to sort of restructure the way that they would go. So they buried all their rebel gold to be dug up at a later date. And the new plan would be, instead of trying to war with what would be considered North America, like northern states, the global South would become the new territory that they would try to conquer and enslave to provide, value to the American South. And so, knowing as much as I do about this whack conspiracy theory, but these people believe, there are books on books about this idea of this rebel gold and Confederate gold, and that it would fund the essentially like enslaving and annexation of South America to re-provide free labor for Southern American states. So the
South would rise again by strategically going souther.
Yes, they would go south instead, because they are recognized. This book, it's called Rebel Gold, if you want to read it. I think it's very interesting.
God. This sounds awesome.
He was like, the gentility of the North would never allow for slavery again. However, the gentility of the North is also extremely racist and tolerates a lot of slavery and sort of like lower conditions for people who live in the Southern Hemisphere. So they would maybe not be as easily identify if the South were rising again, if they were taking over South America, and if it were using prison labor, right? These were narco terrorists, these were drug dealers, these were rapists, and the worst of the worst people. And that's sort of like mirrors a lot of the language that Trump uses when describing South America for so long. And certainly we've destroyed a lot of the critical infrastructure or ability for independence on places like Honduras and Haiti and whatnot.
Yep.
And so there is this idea that that is what he's doing, and that the shield are the right-wing wannabe elites, right, that would like help him, either El Salvador would become a central prison state, some sort of penal colony with work. Same thing with Mexico. They would defeat Mexico to sort of take over the tourism and whatnot, but they would be able to do this together this way. And that is all conspiracy, but this is what some of those whack jobs talk about.
I listen, I'm not entirely disabused of these notions. The one of the things that I'm pretty interested in Honduras specifically is I don't know if you're aware of the network state movement. This is very much like in the sort of like Peter Thiel techno-feudalism. It's not necessarily a part of his whole Satan thing that he's on right now, which I've kind of stayed away from because, it's just tiring. But the idea is that, you can create this idea, or you can create basically statehood as a service, right? So a lot of my my previous work, so my last book was about living in unrecognized countries to try and find out what a country is in the first place. So I lived in Kurdistan and Kosovo and Somaliland and all these places. But in that journey, I ran into a bunch of crypto nerds who are like, yeah, we're starting countries because like Bitcoin, right? And I was like, help me draw the line here. And as it turns out, these projects are kind of all over the world. And one of the big ones is in Honduras. And this is the island of Roatan, which has been turned into what they call a charter city. And this is, they call their charter city, I know it sounds like 1998 sci-fi movie, but it definitely is exactly that. It's called Prospera. And so in Prospera, like, the peptides flow like wine in the streets. You can just get all sorts of life extension biohacking surgeries that are not necessarily legal anywhere else. And so the idea is,
I'm writing this down. We're going to do a whole episode on Prospera. That's insane.
It's so wild, man.
Yeah. Next week, Prospera with photos. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and so this is like the sort of 2.0 of this techno-libertarianism, right? The 1.0 was the Seasteader movement, and the Seasteader movement was a bunch of billionaires on boats just being like, what if we made our own country? And
I remember this. Yes, I do recall.
Didn't work out.
I do recall.
As it turns out, you do need stuff. You can't just have billionaires on boats. It doesn't.
No, sorry, L. Ron Hubbard. The sea will not provide the way that we thought it would. Yeah.
I've never actually drawn that line before, but you're absolutely right.
L. Ron Hubbard is always right here. He's always sitting right here. Right there.
All hail. W.L. Ron Hubbard. W's in the chat for L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, we gotta, maybe we'll do hot goss and conspiracy theories or something, because I think understanding the conspiracy theories of people with wealth, money, and paranoia helps you understand what is motivating them in some of these cases beyond, even though it sounds absurd to us, it's like, these people believe this. Peter Thiel does believe that the Antichrist is coming, and he's educating on it and holding private seminars about it. Like, as crazy as it sounds, we have to take it seriously and factor that into all the legislation and people, he supports.
And I think you're absolutely you're right about that, and the fact that like we, especially in the United States, we take certain conspiracy theories very, very seriously, and then we sort of wave our hand at religious beliefs that we should take really seriously. So like Peter Thiel's whole like Satan thing is like, man, yeah, we should really listen to him. He's a billionaire. And then we hear reports of over 200 people complaining to the ethics office about religious-based lectures about how this is a sort of like end times battle that the American military is being prepared for. And we sort of wave our hand away at that and say like, oh yeah, but they don't really mean that. And it's like, you should pay people the respect of understanding that they believe what they say,
Yeah.
because it is really important for us to know. And I think conspiracy theory is like, it's American mythology, right?
Mhm.
Like it's our way. We don't have our sort of own indigenous myths, and they're a way of sort of placing ourselves in the center of an incalculable world. Like years
Mhm.
ago, I was in Italy, and taking a tour, and somebody, they showed us this statue of some bronze dude who had been struck by lightning, and the whole statue was black. And she was like, oh, the reason that it's colored that way is because they buried the statue, and they buried the statue because it got hit by lightning one time, and so they thought that the gods were mad at it and hated the statue, so they buried it. And it's like, that's a conspiracy theory for us, right?
There are so which you know why people like conspiracy theories because they're fun and because
They're so much fun.
they allow you to feel smart and make sense, like you said, make sense of a world that's incalculable, and then also sort of like be done with it. Like be like, well, and that's why, because it's haunted. Done. I don't
Yes.
have to think anything else about this. I grew up in this place in Connecticut called the Valley. It's like Derby and Sonia Shelton and Monroe. And Monroe is the town next to Shelton, and that is where the Warrens are from. Famous ghost
Oh,
hunters, the
the
Warrens.
Amityville people, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So growing up, I mean, they really got popular in like the 70s and 80s. I was born in the
Yeah.
80s, but through the 80s and 90s, they were on tour and they used to come to our school, and for like $5, they would do like these massive
Did you see
assemblies.
Annabelle? Did they bring the doll?
They sometimes they would bring the doll, sometimes they wouldn't. I was not allowed to go because I am a scaredy fraidy cat. And okay, so
Fair.
the reason why I wasn't allowed to go is because I demanded that my mother allow me to watch The Exorcist because all my friends had watched it and I wanted to watch it. And I was like 11 or 12, and I demanded to watch it and I couldn't watch it. So she was like, okay, why don't we just shut it off? And I was like, no, I have to finish it. I have to see how it turns out. And she's like, you're ridiculous. So I watched it on mute with a blanket over my head because I was so scared. And then I slept in her room on a mattress for like 6 months. And so when the Warrens came around and I was like, Ma, I want to go hear the demon voices. Can I have $5? She was like, absolutely not. We just got over The Exorcist. Like, you're not going to hear the demon voices. But you could go, and they were very much around town, and everybody talked about them, and they came to like the restaurants and dry cleaners in town and things. So I've like seen them around. But the Warrens created so much lore, but so much importance to our town because it
Yeah.
was like, it's a colonial town in Connecticut where there's not really much going on. It's not like there's really nothing there except the Warrens. And then it becomes like so important to you that the Warrens are from there. And then you become very defensive of them. And then you grow up and you later find out that like Ed Warren was a super creep who like maybe did bad stuff to kids. And like, you're like,
Yeah, yeah. I
ew.
remember I remember watching a documentary about that and be like, wait, like I'm actually somewhat dismayed that you're not real ghost hunters.
We wanted you to be
Like
ghost hunters. They had
I
such
think that
evidence.
that's the thing with conspiracy theories too, where
Yeah.
it's like, the ones that turn out to be accurate sort of end up making the world a little bit more depressing and me a bit more
Yes.
cynical.
Yeah.
And like I want the Tartarians, the hollow earth to be a thing. Like
Right.
that sounds cool. Or like the 0 point energy. Like that sounds amazing. Let's do
Mhm.
that future. But instead it's just like,
Well,
oh, cabals.
I know. I'm so what a bummer that the
Right?
pedophilic cabals are actually what was the true conspiracy theory here. And they were trying to get me to like find out if Angelina Jolie was drinking her brother's blood. Meanwhile, like
Yeah.
Marvelous says here, I knew about Epstein's Island in the early 2000s, thought it was a conspiracy theory. Now we're all learning it was true. It's because just because it's conspiracy theory doesn't mean it's untrue. And you're totally right. Like sometimes they come up with these things, they make them sound stranger than fiction. And then it's like, no, actually, it was real. Or like in the case of many Republican talking points, every accusation is a confession.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I like. Oh, I was talking to you about this yesterday.
Mhm.
But I was watching your thing on CNN and listening to kind of this sort of like programmed reflexive response of somebody on the right side of the aisle being like, yeah, well, and it's almost like when Hegseth said something along the lines of, it's like, well, if Iran wanted boats to go through, well, they'd stop shooting at them. It's like, How are you? Did you not hear what
You know
you
what
just said?
pisses me off about the Hegseth thing is, so speaking of going on like CNN or these TV shows and whatnot, like a lot of the times I go, I feel like I'm on like a little recon mission of my own, because you get to be in the green room for about 45 minutes before you go on and maybe 10 minutes
Yeah.
afterwards. And I know that they're going to put me with like somebody from the right wing or like some sort of expert, sometimes a congressman. And so I'll say yes to going on TV a lot of the time for the green room experience. And
Yeah.
because I think it's good to like break the glass on the ceiling and the idea of like creators being treated as professional journalists and serious people. So like go on to like continue to try and like keep doors open for other people to go on.
Of
Like
course.
just like Lee from Politics Girl and Adam Mockler and all these people are doing great stuff. And every time one of us gets on, it means more of us gets on. So I'll do it even
Yeah.
though it doesn't really like benefit me personally. But and sometimes it's scary. But the right-wing people that are in the room, they're always so nice to me in the green room. We have the best conversations. They're so honest about the stuff that's going on. They build like a real camaraderie kind of thing with me. Like they want me to think they're cool. They want to kind of come off as like, hey, I'm not as extreme as, I think, like, oh, this is just how the American game is. And having worked in catering in Washington, D.C. for so many years previous, that used to be true. It used to be that, Congress people go on the House floor and they'd fight, and then they'd all be at Nancy Pelosi's like Georgetown Wharf condo for a fundraiser or for an event later.
Right.
That's not how it is anymore, homies. Like, no, you are doing massive damage. And it is shocking to me the way that they will say things like Hegseth should have been out during Signalgate. Hegseth should have never been confirmed, but Trump's like the way that he looked, and it was all about sort of casting for him. And I'm like, well, why don't they get him out now? Obviously, he's way in over his depth, and Driscoll is right there. Like, Driscoll's right there. Like, I think people would accept him as the secretary, and they're like, nah, because the Democrats want to showboat too much, and they're going to have to go through another hearing, and Trump doesn't like when anybody has to go through a hearing because it takes from his headlines. Because everything becomes about those Senate confirmation hearings. So they're just leaving them there. But yeah, I think Driscoll's probably running a lot more, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff are running a lot more than we think. And I'm like, okay, but why are you doing this? You're going to go out there right now and you're going to stick up for Hegseth, when back here, you're all like, nah, he's a loser.
And then you're also sort of seeing this selling of unrealities, which make our partners unable to interoperate with one another, with us. So it's like, right now we've got like this enormous situation in Iran with the Strait of Hormuz being closed, that because of the sort of information blockade from the top, from the United States. We are, which I'm glad that a lot of the good information is sort of poking through. From the United States administration, basically they're saying, oh, it's going to be over in a week, and then gas prices are going to go back down. And I don't know if you remember during COVID, they were like, and then this whole thing's going to go away like magic. And then 4 years later, it didn't. That's the kind of moment that we're in right now. And so what the administration needs to do, sort of from a public level, is they need to reassure the public that the prices of gas are going to go out and go down. But tactically, what actually needs to happen to make that happen is impossible. So there's a couple of things that need to happen. One of those things is secure transit needs to happen through the Strait of Hormuz. And this is one of the things that requires coalition building. And typically in another administration, you would build that coalition before doing a world-changing action. We are sort of building the plane as it's flying now. And so the administration has gone to not only European nations, but
Germany laughed him right off the call. Germany was like, we're not sending warships to help you in the Strait of Hormuz. So sorry.
100% not. And sorry, we're just going to buy more Russian oil, because we literally have to.
Right.
And he's even gone to China, and he's gone to Korea.
I saw that. Wait.
Right.
Trump going to China, Eric. How crazy is that? Trump going to China to ask China to send warships to secure the Strait of Hormuz for America when China and Iran are partners.
Well, and they also have an overland. They have an overland oil shipment too, which I'm assuming has not been targeted by the United States, because that would be enormously problematic for China. But yeah, we've really sort of perfected this circular firing squad of American interests. And frankly, I think that the lack of coalition building that seems to be possible may actually arrest any acceleration of the conflict, and I hope that that's the case. However, the damage that has been done is already enough to send the global economy into a tailspin.
Right.
And we have not seen the effects of this yet. The place that we're going to see it first is likely going to be in India, because they have a lower strategic reserve than other countries. They're just a really big country. There has been sort of an olive branch that has been given to India by the United States, in so much as saying, hey, we're going to relieve some of the sanctions on Russia to allow you guys to, to trade, to purchase Russian oil. So that just throws way more money into Russia's coffers. And meanwhile,
right. And obviously
Europe
we're
is
supposed to be supporting Ukraine, right? But now they,
right.
Forget it. This is the stupidest thing, Eric. Has there ever been a stupider time in American history?
Oh, man,
when it
I
comes
really
to
wish I had a great example for you, but I don't. And that
I
sucks.
can't. I mean, I know we've done horrible, horrible things so many times. And even looking back at like the war in Iraq being something we could look at and be like, that was so stupid, so stupid. Yeah. This is like 1,000 times stupider, because it's not just Iran, but now we're hearing maybe we are going to go into Iraq because of the militias that are lined up in Iraq. Like,
yes, yeah, I don't think that people kind of, and I'm happy to go into this
talk a little bit about that.
Spend a decent amount of time in Iraq. I don't know how sort of people conceptualize Iraq, but it has changed a great deal since the global war on terror. So I
will tell you firstly, I think of this, I'm going to tell you from like previously uneducated about this American response before I got my new maps and I learned about it. Growing up, I thought Iraq was the size of like Rhode Island. Yes. I literally thought it was like a small, because when you look on an American map, it's very small. Tiny. I was like, oh, and if we're occupying it, it's like occupying Rhode Island. Not true, not accurate, quite large.
Big old desert.
Big old place.
Desert. Yeah, got a lot going on in there. Turns out a lot of empires came from there too. So the sort of the first Iraq got its borders from the end of World War I. There was a guy named Mark Sykes and a guy named Francois Picot, and since you had a French guy and an English guy in a room with a globe, of course they had to make some borders because it was the end of World War I.
They like to do.
So they just started drawing lines on maps. And Iraq was the sort of English mandate. So they were like, well, this clearly belongs to us. And when you have these sort of artificially drawn borders, I'll always say never trust a state with straight borders, because those were put there by somebody who didn't understand anything that was going on the ground. But you end up with this ethnic and religious mix throughout the entire country. And when you have these artificial borders, then you essentially put into place an autocratic government that is going to force these people to get along and interoperate with one another. So the mix of individual, cultures in Iraq is quite wide. But you have basically the Kurds in the north, the Sunni, who were sort of dominating the center. They ended up being enfranchised by the English back in the day, and then ended up becoming the party that Saddam Hussein was the head of, the Ba'athist Party. And then you have the Shia in the south. Now the Shia are largely religiously and politically connected with Iran, since Iran is this sort of deems itself as the protector and purveyor of the Shia, who are a minority in the Islamic world. Also, you've got two very important holy sites in Shia Islam. You have Karbala and you have Najaf. Karbala was a site of a holy battle in Shia Islam, where the death of Hussein happened. So if you've ever seen that festival, it's called Ashura, where people are sort of striking themselves with whips and blades and stuff. That's a Shia festival, and it represents the death of Hussein. So those areas must be protected. These are enormously important for Shia Islam. And so because of that, Iran wanted to train and build up pretty good paramilitaries throughout Iraq. And then these paramilitaries became a good deal more powerful in the fight against the Islamic State, because the Islamic State and the Shia militias had no love for one another. and were more than willing to duke it out, because of course you have this really, really violent expression of Sunni Islam, and you have a fairly well organized and well trained expression of Shia protectionism within the south of Iraq. So from the Western perspective, the narrative has been, oh, well, the U.S. came in there with our coalition partners and we armed the Kurds and we, beat ISIS, basically. Not necessarily the case. The Shia
We love
militias
to
were
arm the Kurds.
Yeah.
We love to arm the Kurds.
Just constantly is a refrain.
We're like, this will fix it. This small militia will fix it. And okay.
Which is so it's like I was in Iraq during the Kurdish referendum on independence, and it was a very exciting time to be in the capital of Kurdistan during this referendum. But it was also really sad at the same time, because I was like, I could see this sort of American double talk happening from the ground level, where it's like, I understand geostrategically that you need to give this group of people enough weapons to fight for you, but not enough to create their own country.
Right.
And
that's the thing, right? That's the thing. We'll give you enough to feel like you can win, but you can never actually win. This doesn't.
To watch the diplomatic support for this just melt away in real time.
Same with Ukraine. Look, they were like, absolutely. Oh yeah, you're doing a great job, and now they're like, fuck, how long are you gonna? Yeah, oh, you actually do want to win.
Which I think, okay, so here's a question for you, because I was trying to game this out, is like, if there had been, like, if Biden had had more audacity, right? I think in terms of chief exports of the current administration, audacity is amongst them. But if the Biden administration had had more audacity and drawn and stuck by a true hard red line in Ukraine and said, okay, no fly zone, not only is the United States fully behind this, but Europe is fully behind protecting Ukraine. Do you think we end up seeing this fallout elsewhere?
It's tough because Biden's focus was so heavily Israel, Gaza, and his mentality was so affected by his disbelief that the American public generally, and especially the youth, did not support what he was doing, his policy as it related to Palestine. And he was so consumed by that, from what I felt and saw, that I don't know that Ukraine became, if that had been going on at the same time, I think he might have shown a little bit more strength and audacity towards this, like standing up to Russia, having a NATO moment, having a patriotic moment, even like to do something. We had great narrative. We had excellent propaganda in the beginning of the Ukraine war. Think about the grandmothers and the sunflower seeds in the pockets of Russian soldiers and the ghost of Ukraine. I mean, all of it was rocking. It was like set to be the Captain America movie. It would have been great. But Biden was so consumed by the fact that that during the election year one, he was, as we got closer to that time, was being pushed out, and he was being told even from the beginning, like, you're a one-term president, and he didn't believe that would be true. I think his mentality was so consumed by his disbelief that the country had changed in priority and in value structure so much from where it had been. And this idea that no war actually really genuinely means no war. It means no providing weapons of war to other people. It means no support for Israel unconditionally. It means that. So I don't know that I can even conceive of how Biden would have done better or set Ukraine up better before leaving. I also think that the Biden administration very much thought Kamala Harris was going to win. They didn't. I will say, I don't think they wanted her to win. I think there are people within that administration who very much were saboteurs of her campaign and didn't want her to be the pick. And that was very open and obvious through them even saying things like, we should have an open convention, which we had no time for. But I think then they got lazy and thought, well, she'll just win. I think a lot of people thought, well, she'll just win, and so we don't have to try hard, because there were things that he left to her that Trump picked up that include Ukraine, Gaza, and the TikTok sale, which now has a massive impact on our free speech and digital space.
Interesting. Okay, so did you feel like, because I remember that at least hearing that there was almost a sort of like this leftover bit of Ukraine
Mhm.
where there was a sort of deal on the table that was set up for the next person to come in, where it's
Yes.
like, okay, we're ready to sign this thing and like let's make it happen. And then that ended up culminating in the time that poor Zelensky came in and just got reamed by
Yeah.
the U.S. government.
They were setting up. I just think there was such disbelief in the last 2 years of Biden's administration that just things were going the way that they were and were going to end up how they did, and such a like resistance to accept that. And I think we see leftover in that with the way that Chuck Schumer behaves even to today, that the idea that we are winning and seeing blue waves does not result in him getting to stay the leader. He is not getting the credit for these blue waves. These blue waves are happening in spite of his leadership, is the mentality that people have. But Biden thought, okay, well, if we leave, and he didn't tell me this, I'm just telling you, being in
Yeah.
there where I felt it was. Biden felt like, okay, well, we'll have this moment for the next Democratic president to look extremely strong on military. That's going to help us there with Ukraine. Kamala did not agree with his policies in the Middle East, but the Gaza situation would have been over because of the massive level of destruction that had occurred during his reign.
Right.
So there wasn't much war left to do, and it would be like the rebuilding, and she could, impose her policies, which were very Palestinian two-state solution, which is not enough, but was better than his, on what was going on. And there would have been no talk of hotels and luxury accommodations popping up on the shores of Gaza or whatever. So
Yeah.
I think he thought that she would be able to take that over, and that would be a separation of difference. You can hear this in his speech when they ask him, well, we think that Kamala's policies on Gaza are different than yours. What do you think? And he says, no light shines between, kid, like meaning while he's the president, no light shines between their policies. But then he later says all vice presidents, when they become president, strike out and have their own agendas, and I will support hers when it's her turn, type thing. That was all about Gaza. And then the TikTok deal was supposed to be Jake Sullivan and Monica blew that. Truly, just didn't think TikTok was as valuable as it should be. Thought that most of who they considered their core base of voters didn't want their kids on the app anyway. Oh, you guys could just go to Instagram. Oh, it's just stupid. The China hawks were weird about it. And what it left was Biden would have had the opportunity to appoint that board and decide how this would have moved forward, or Kamala, and instead Trump does. So now we have the Ellison boy. The TikTok thing was a huge mess. I could not have done more to try and explain that to them, including an Oval Office visit. And I think that he got it. But he also, he was an older gentleman that had a certain sort of personality to him. And I remember him like being like, you're going to be okay, buddy. Don't worry. You're so talented. You're such a good kid. You're going to be okay. Don't worry about the TikTok. Things come and go. And I was like, you don't please, God, listen to me, what I'm telling you about 7 million small businesses that are on this platform, and the way that like the censorship will be controlled, and the way that people will feel like TikTok changed, even if it doesn't, and what an uphill battle that will be. So the TikTok thing was also about Gaza. You are correct.
I think that one of the things, that, analytically that like I'm always looking for is like, what's happening now that I'll use as a benchmark in the future, basically, because history doesn't repeat itself, but it always rhymes, that whole thing. But also there's another sort of strategic theory that says, hey, anytime you do something, you're basically creating this new political weapon. And by creating the political weapon, you must be able to hand this to your opponent and say, now you get to use it. Right. So there are a couple of big ones that we've seen recently. The capture of Maduro. Okay, well, game on. That's legal now.
But they were like, isn't it cool? Isn't it impressive? I'm like, it is extremely impressive. And you blew it. Like, okay, so so you used the thing and you did the stuff, but then you didn't follow through. You didn't complete the regime change if that's what we were going to do.
Right, and I mean, this is, you know, my sort of operational theory with Venezuela has always been, and my operational theory thus far with the Trump administration has been that really it's about maintaining the minimum effective structure for various like governments, and just changing the beneficiaries. And so I'm going to keep the structure of Venezuela. I'm going to change the beneficiaries of Venezuelan oil, because like I can say as much about you know, peace and democracy and freedom and narco-terrorism as I want, but really at the end of the day, the strategic imperative is to deny China oil while maintaining oil dominance specifically within our hemisphere. And you know, that's the, you know, life's hard, get a helmet kid angle of this.
We could just do alternate power, and that'd be great. Okay. Last thing that we're going to talk about that I don't even know if you know about exactly yet, but I'm seeing it as the Oscars. Yes.
No, I didn't watch them.
Rebel Wilson's publicist being Justin Baldoni's publicist. No, that's for Girl Chat.
I know.
On Friday.
I was gagged.
I was gagged.
Am I an entertainment journalist yet?
Yeah, we're going to make it there. We're going to get there. First of all, they treat it like a reality show. I suppose we'll have war updates. We'll have Kardashian out there on the front lines at some point. That little Timothy Chalamet boy. So here's the thing. When we talk about like stuff that gets my little ears perked up and I'm like, ooh, I don't like that, but I don't know, it won't hit the headlines, but I think it's interesting, is Canada signing a deal with China for e-vehicles.
Yeah, it's
freaking me out a little bit.
So EVs are, first of all, China's doing really well in terms of EVs.
Dude, they're dope looking. I've seen them.
I've ridden
cool ass looking cars.
I've ridden in a lot of them because I live in Albania for the most part, and they got a ton of Chinese EVs. They are very speedy and fun. So great job on that, China.
Yep.
However, expanding into to North America isn't really the sort of business win that it may seem, because it's a fairly small population out there, compared to, you know, selling domestically or selling to Europe or Russia or all of these other countries. What it does is it sort of gives a good deal of leverage back to China and or back to Canada, which needs leverage on the United States at the moment, because you know, it's a smaller population, it's a smaller, very stable government, and let's not forget, you know, they were threatened with being the 51st state for a while. And so Mark Carney understands business and he understands leverage. However, there is something that might be a bit of a weakness in the sort of Chinese supply chain here. And this is something that the United States is certainly attempting to do with the new national security strategy. And that is the fact that China has no really good access to indigenous lithium. Lithium in the world really comes from the lithium triangle, and that's Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina.
How convenient for the shield.
Yes, weirdly also in the shield of America. So the U.S. is really working on this strategy of reducing China's ability to maintain really difficult supply chains into their country that are supporting their manufacturing sector. So EVs are absolutely thirsty for lithium. The limiting factor here are things like lithium and nickel and things that China simply has to import. So is it a good moment of leverage for Canada to say, hey, we're making this deal now so that maybe in the future we can trade this back over for EVs from the United States? Yeah, that sounds like a pretty solid strategy. Do those things actually make much of a difference in the, you know, to the Chinese bottom line? Not really. But at the same time, it is a big play for another place in the Western Hemisphere. So China needs to maintain that supply line of lithium. So that means greater, greater exposure to South America.
I think it's gonna okay, so that's like the hard power capitalist side of it. I'm gonna tell you right now, I see my friends from Canada every day up here in Buffalo, Rochester area. Buffalo, Canada, Detroit, Canada. We are one place up here,
We are
okay?
brothers in
We are
poutine.
brothers. We cross that bridge all the time. And you bringing those dope ass Chinese EVs into the streets of Buffalo is going to get it, it's a soft power Chinese thing, right? Because you see
100%.
these really cool cars. We can't have them here, but they can have them in Canada. You could maybe like get one if you go up to Canada. I don't know how that would work with importing it, probably not, but like
I have actually looked into this, and it is very cost
I would think it's
preventative.
hard
It's
because there's those
really,
little Japanese trucks, and I want one of those so bad too.
those are
That you
cute as hell.
so
Those are some
dope.
Studio Ghibli looking trucks.
Ah, I just love like I grew up like with a car dad, and I just like all the different kind of like car stuff, and I just think they're so interesting. And like if my dream car would be like a Rivian or something, just because I think they're just
They're
so
way cool looking. Yeah.
interestingly structured, and I like the idea of like being able to like show like a weird little freak thing. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be noticeable to people in Buffalo and Detroit, which are car cities, that these Chinese vehicles are coming in and out. We're seeing on the K trucks. Those are dope. Like,
Yes.
and we're just seeing Chinese soft power really kind of like come into areas that you would consider to be like traditionally salt of the earth American places, right? The Rust Belt and whatnot. And I think that's going to be an interesting play to watch how people's ideas about China change compared to the way that like the older generations are such like China hawk, no, 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 communism, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And now with K-pop and the dope ass Chinese e-vehicles and all this kind of stuff, it feels a little bit like
We're gonna
feels a little bit like
see.
soft power. Also,
We're gonna
we've
see
got
a
a friend
big.
in Albania
Yeah.
here, Brendan.
Oh,
Brenda McGannon. She'll see you in Albania.
she's with a name like Brenda McCann, I'm guessing she's American. Chabonga Shibria. Yeah, I mean, so we're gonna see. Actually, a good thing to mention, because it's happening, I think, towards the end of this week. Two big things happening this week to keep an eye on. God, three big things happening this week. Sheesh. Okay,
Get it in 7 minutes. I got to go to my next live at 11:20.
I got it.
Lightning
Okay,
round
so
with Eric.
here are the things to keep in mind. One, Ramadan ends either tonight or tomorrow. It just depends on who is witnessing the moon. That is usually a sort of pretty big moment. So Eid is a pretty big moment for the Islamic world, and we might see some geopolitical shifts around it. The second thing is the fact that the Chinese National Congress, where they sort of unveil their 5-year plan, that is coming out probably by the end of this week.
Oof.
And what we have seen with that is it's really more of an internal focus, that they are not going to try and sell to the outside world and be the manufacturing infrastructure of the entire world anymore. In fact, they're trying to be the manufacturing infrastructure for themselves. So that now it's more about being the globe's marketplace rather than the globe's manufacturing place. Huge deal there.
Yeah.
The other thing is probably in about 7 days, we're going to see that Marine Expeditionary Unit show up in the Persian Gulf. So that's when that boat arrives, and that is pretty important moment. So we have a big week ahead of us.
Well, thank you for that, Eric. Thanks for hanging out today. We'll be back next Monday or next Tuesday, same time, to talk about what happens this week.
I hope it's such a boring week and we just talk about conspiracy theories.
Well, we'll have to add. We'll add a show. This is the thing. When I was like, I texted him like, "Will you go live with me every Tuesday for an hour and a half?" And he's like, "Yeah, no questions." We're like, "Yeah," because people just need a place to anchor in where you could be like, "Okay, I don't know what we're gonna say. We have no script. These were my notes. I literally just wrote down Prospera because I came in with an empty note card today. We'll get it
Chinese
wrapped around.
good.
We'll start segmenting. We'll see what's going on. We've got a producer coming to work with us on Monday to help us like wrap our arms around this. But it's literally like Kids Incorporated. Okay,
I feel healed by this. I needed to speak with somebody out loud about all of these things. So I really appreciate it. This is great.
This is what we have to do. I feel like we're in the days before COVID where like life is changing in a way that I don't understand. So I need to create a routine for myself and just have people that I can like talk to, even if it's about rebel gold conspiracy theories in between actual shit that's happening. You know what I mean?
So many deep dives to go on. This is amazing. Yeah.
All right, we'll see
All
you
right.
next week on Tuesday. Follow the Under Report. He does updates every single day, so you don't have to wait until Tuesday. You can follow the Under Report now and watch his whiteboard content where he gives you all the hot geopolitical goss.
Yeah.
All right, bye, friends.
Bye, everybody.